Life and Teachings of Jesus and Mary. Jesus' Ministry. When 30 years of age, Jesus started on his public ministry, teaching, healing, and performing so-called miracles. He had attained mastery, which is the conscious control of energy, vibration, and substance. The time had come in the divine plan of his service in that embodiment to go forth and do these things publicly, to be an example and give proof of the cosmic law to mankind, not only to those who would witness his works, but for future generations. When Jesus' public ministry began, his and Mary's ways parted in the outer. She was devoted to and concentrated on holding the pattern of his victory over death in the resurrection. During his ministry, when Jesus and the disciples were travelling, she went to Bethany often and spent much of the time there with Mary and Martha, and made a daily visit to Bethany Hill. Adina and Party had been back in Jerusalem 5 weeks before they again heard anything of Jesus. John came with Lazarus to the uncle's home. Naturally, they were anxious to know if he knew anything about Jesus. He related to them his experience of finding him in the desert. Then they wanted to know if they thought he was still alive. John answered yes. He came to let them know that after 40 days he appeared on the Jordan where John the Baptist was with his disciples. They were talking about the Christ and wondering when he would come out of the exile. Then the prophet looked up, saw Jesus approaching, and said, "Behold, the Christ upon whom the Spirit descended. He has emerged like gold from the fiery furnace." John, standing by him, turned and also beheld Jesus walking in dignity, peace, and composure. John was delighted and awed and felt a great love for him. Going forward to meet him, he knelt at his feet. Jesus embraced him as a brother, saying, "Faithful and full of love, will you follow me?" John answered he would wherever he went. Andrew, also a disciple of the prophet, was there with John and asked the Master Jesus where he dwelt. Jesus said, "Come and see." John and Andrew were overjoyed to have found him and followed him to his abode. Then the uncle wanted to know what took place between Jesus and John the Baptist. John said not a word was spoken, they were like strangers. The Baptist went into the wilderness on the other side of the Jordan as they followed beloved Jesus into Bethabara to a widow's house where he was staying. They stayed there with him overnight. They learned so much in just one day and were so grateful. That day, Jesus wanted to go to Nazareth to see his mother. John had decided to be his disciple and follow him, and so he had come to Jerusalem to attend to some affairs and let his cousin Mary know of his intent. The following day, he would leave to meet Jesus in Galilee. Lazarus envied John and would like to be a disciple of Jesus, but felt it his duty to care for his mother and sisters and pass up the opportunity to be in his presence all the time and listen to his wisdom. Yet here, Jesus had been among them, but they knew him not as the Messiah. How blind they had been. The day Jesus left for the Jordan for Galilee, he found Philip, and Jesus said to him, "Follow me." Philip was also a disciple of John the Baptist, thus was prepared to receive Jesus as being the Christ. He was from Bethsaida, as were also Andrew and Peter originally, but were now occupied in fishing at Capernaum. Andrew went and found his brother Simon and told them they had found the Christ. Simon went with Andrew to see Jesus. Jesus, observing his character of firmness, said to him, "He was Simon, son of John, and shall be called Peter." The Jewish custom was to change a person's name when a public confession of religion was made. To follow a rabbi or teacher was a common term used when becoming his student. Rabbi means master. It is sometimes written that the disciples addressed Jesus as Rabbi, also as Lord, which, used as we use Sir or Master, the Germans use Herr and the French Monsieur. These men followed Jesus, leaving their nets and fishing occupation. Peter left his family, wife and children without support. Philip was so happy of having found the Christ that he went immediately to his brother Nathanael's house in Cana. He found him under a fig tree in his garden in prayer. He told him they had found the Messiah of whom the prophets wrote. Nathanael, later called Bartholomew, asked where he was so he could see him. Philip said he was Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Mary and Joseph. Nathanael showed disappointment and said, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" Philip told him to come and see for himself. So they went to Jesus. When Jesus saw them coming, he said to those with him, "There was another Israelite without guile," referring to Nathanael, who, hearing it, asked Jesus how he knew him. Jesus said he saw him under the fig tree before Philip came to him. Jesus was able to see him there and was made aware of his qualifications through the inner sight, the all-seeing eye, and inner perception. This arrested Nathanael's attention, as he knew he was alone in the garden and not seen by anyone. He looked Jesus straight in the face steadfastly, then exclaimed that he was the Son of God, Christ. This was illumined to him from within himself by his higher self, his own Christ self, or by one of the masters. Jesus was pleased by this and told him, since that was enough to make him believe, he would see many greater things. The time would come when he would see angels from heaven descend upon the Son of Man. When Jesus saw James in his boat on the lake, he called him, and James left everything and followed him. John, the beloved, left Jerusalem and went to Nazareth. He found the home of Mary and Jesus by the people gathering there to see Jesus. It was a humble place. John noticed the carpenter's shop adjoining the house where Jesus worked when occupied in the outer world activities to support his mother and himself, it is said. They lived as other people. Jesus did not take advantage of the powers he had for self. He did not use them to provide a big residence, elaborate things, personal comforts and desires. He used them only to produce miracles, do good for others as an attestation that he was Christ. Although he had the power of precipitation, he let things come through natural channels, even food, except on certain occasions. He was limited in his actions and in giving his teaching by the prophecies because he was to fulfill them, therefore conformed to them. The priests tried to make Jesus conform his teaching to their setup. He went along with their customs so as to get the attention from those who could not accept, but did not subjugate himself to their religion. Observing the ordinary situation of Jesus and Mary made John wonder if Jesus could really be the Christ, whom all had been looking forward to for centuries. But as he recalled the descent of the dove and the voice at the baptism and his preservation on the desert, he was reassured. As he entered the house, Jesus noticed him and held out his hand to him, welcoming him warmly. Then, pointing to the men, Andrew, Peter, Nathanael, and James, he told him they were his brethren, brothers in the light, who had also left the outer world to follow him. John was surprised and overjoyed to see his brother James there. Jesus already had 6 devoted disciples whom he brought home to Mother Mary, Mary, serene, lovingly also listened to him speak. The disciples wanted to know what they should do. Jesus said the birds had nests to go to and animals had caves or holes, but he had no place to lay his head. That those who would follow him would have to give up all human desires, the desires of self, give up his personal life for the good of all life. He came to save the lost, to rescue man from himself, the outer self, human desires and habits. Such was the action of the Christ. By lost was meant those who had lost their way back home and were now engrossed and immersed in their human creation, the wilderness of consciousness. Just to believe in Jesus Christ, as some think and teach, is not enough. The human nature must be changed into Christ nature. That is, the human carnal thoughts and feelings must be purified and replaced by Christ qualities. He taught one should prepare to meet the King. The King was God, and only the pure in heart could see God face to face. To enter the kingdom, one must be willing to purify himself of all carnal and evil thoughts, all passion and human desires of the lower or outer self, and all desires to gratify these. Such things could not pass through the narrow gate, that one must live the life, but few were ready to do so. Most people, when they find these desires and things cannot pass into the kingdom, turn away.